Today's topic is strategies for managing large and increased enrollments in your departments, and the goal of this is to actually try to engage everyone in a conversation about what their experiences are, where they're having challenges, where they're having successes in dealing with the increased enrollments that many departments are certainly reporting through this process. But before we get into that discussion, I just want to set the stage with a few slides, and then we'll pose some broader questions. The first thing I want to do is show our graph. I'm sure many of you have seen this in the past of U.S. Geoscience enrollments, and as you can see, one of the big things that's going on right now is the large growth in both the graduate and undergraduate enrollments since about 2008 in the Geosciences. The steepness of that curve does start approaching what we saw in the 70s and 80s during the oil boom, and obviously the precipitous crash afterwards. Most of this, and when we discuss this with folks in the industry and that were watching workforce at the time, they feel most of this area, hopefully you can see my mouse, but the peak up here, was, shall we call, froth. Was not necessarily considered a lot of high-quality students. A lot of folks are just being recruited in from the edges. And we're starting to approach those levels again in enrollments, obviously not on a percentage basis for university enrollment, but certainly in absolute numbers. And it'd be interesting to also understand if folks feel that the quality of enrollment of the students has remained the same as we've seen increases. And the degrees granted is obviously a muted reflection of these trends and is slowly growing and obviously has a delay. But what I thought has been most interesting was this very sharp increase that we saw very recently in the number of master's degrees granted. And we think there's a couple reasons for that, which I'll talk about in a moment. So one of the things that precipitated this topic is some, what I'll call a few data points, conversations, input, and other things that we've gotten from department chairs, from deans, from students, from folks in industry. A couple things that sort of really caught our attention is we've had a couple programs, including one very large research university in Texas, that has indicated that they've been turning away perfectly qualified and externally supported graduate students because they don't actually have the capacity in their program to handle anyone else. So obviously that's a huge concern if we're at that stage in some of these programs. Not to be able to accommodate all those that can and are able to pursue their degree. There's also a number of departments and programs reporting that they're having to actually encourage students to go to other programs like in geography or maybe environmental science and the others because they have so many enrolled undergraduates especially, and they're identifying the students who maybe are not in the traditional course. Their interests aren't necessarily in the traditional core solid or geoscience or whatever, and so they're pushing them to other parts of the campus. And again, many of the large research universities are reporting that, particularly down in the southern half of the country. Additionally, one of the things that's been surprising is we've had a few cases where folks have reported that their campus support base, things like the Career Center, motor pool, all kinds of the support structures on the campus have actually been pulling back in essence, their cooperation with the programs because they're viewed as a highly successful department that should be more independent. And in many cases, these are programs that weren't very large that many years ago. And so this has been a new experience for them as well. So certainly a dilemma for them. And then one thing that we did get quite a few reports of this summer were students that were not actually able to find open slots in field camps. Most of the field camps seem to be filled, and obviously that's delaying their graduation, and that obviously is a sort of a bulk capacity problem. So these are a few data points that we've seen come through. And I am going to be unmuting everyone here in a moment. We're going to just try to open up the conversation, posing some questions. Would love if individuals came through and try to address some of these ideas and perhaps propose some additional questions. things like such as what's driving your local enrollment, whether you're succeeding or you're seeing low enrollments, what drives it in your local environment. If you are having large enrollments, how are you accommodating that? What are some of the strategies that can be shared? Because this is being recorded. There's a lot of folks that wanted to attend, but because it's early in the semester, have conflicting meetings, and so I expect this recording to be viewed a lot. One of the key challenges that's been proposed is that there are real logistical issues in dealing with field and lab work, and that certainly has been cited as one of the restrictions on the number of graduate students that folks are willing to take on. What's the stance of your administration, the university level administration on your on dealing with higher enrollments? One of the other questions is sudden increase in new masters. How might that impact your program? Are these students that were PhD track and decided to jump out and grab a job early, or is there this new crop where we're seeing increased numbers of students that are coming in solely to get a master's? It certainly changes some of the dynamics. And then, another question I pose to the community is, where all do you see the onlines and MOOCs and these others, other medium for dealing with increased enrollment? So these are some of the big, broad questions, and I am going to unmute everyone. That's just sort of trying to spur on some conversation, and I will quickly. And so by unmuting you, what I can do, you can mute yourself with that little microphone. So if you're not speaking, if you can mute yourself, that will keep the noise down. So everyone should be now unmuted and can control your own audio. So I would be curious, out of our attendees, who out there, you might want to introduce yourself, and who is experiencing new record enrollments and who maybe is struggling to get sufficient enrollments. Any takers, or do I need to call names? All right, we got a question. No mic. Okay, Alan, if you want to type in your question, that's fine. We can share that. Questions or comments? Or if you'd be more comfortable in just simply typing in your questions, that's fine too. We can certainly work with that. All right, let me pull Alan's question over here. Wow, so you've seen a 100% increase in your enrollments since 2004. That's pretty substantial in less than a decade. So, Alan, has this been a problem for you? And if so, how, or have you found ways to leverage this for success? Okay, you're trying to get them into all research opportunities. And all required for senior. Wow. Interesting. So James, it looks like you do have a mic. I don't know if you know that. So it looks like there seems to definitely be an issue that the faculty availability is a limiting factor, both at the graduate level and for the research opportunities. Yes. Has there been any discussion at the higher levels in the university about ways to open up other lines or other opportunities to be able to accommodate more students that way, maybe through joint appointments with other departments or anything like that? Nothing yet? All right. So James is reporting that no, in fact, their support is decreasing with a hiring freeze and budget cuts, which certainly seems to be prominent across a lot of departments. And Alan is indicating that their engineering programs do help out, but they have their own senior capstone courses as well, which limits their ability to help out. So I'll pick some names. Joel, I believe you are at Towson. I'm curious, how that situation is going at Towson. Certainly with College Park having been a big program, but I know Towson has been growing in the last 15 years. Are you experiencing stresses on your department?
Am I coming across okay?
Perfectly.
Okay, so yeah, the program kind of goes up and down in terms of majors. We currently have 4 tenure track slots with a couple of lecturers, and it's been growing enough that we just get another lecturer added this past. The second lecturer is new to us. So for our program, our majors I think are currently 20 for the 5 full-time faculty. Hopefully on the upswing, but a lot of our pressure comes from the environmental science major, which went from 0 to 200 over the last 10 years. And so our courses are all full, somewhat with our majors, and then mostly with the environmental science students.
So it's
not huge pressure yet, but it may be.
So it's actually the support courses you're doing for other programs is causing some real stress then.
Yeah, and the environmental science degree here doesn't have many of its own courses. Most of their courses are geology or biology, and then there's an environmental geology track within the environmental science course, which adds enrollment to our classes in addition to the general environmental science students. And then we also have an earth-based science degree for those who want to go into secondary ed. So yeah, we're definitely not having any trouble filling our courses. More the problem is offering enough courses, particularly when people go on sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
And, with such small numbers, that plays a big role in what we can offer in any given year.
Interesting. And so Alan seems to be indicating that Furman's sustainability program is built the same way. So lots of classes among a lot of departments, and so that's definitely a draw. So I guess a question for you, Joel, and for Alan is, are you getting credit in your program, with the university administration for the fact that you are carrying that kind of load, or is it just sort of being ignored?
I think it is. It certainly helps that our dean is a geologist and used to be in the department. And so, yeah, we are getting support. We just had a second lecturer added because of our large enrollment, particularly in our introductory geology course, which serves as a gen ed or core curriculum requirement. So, yes, we are being supported well and have just been given a body to teach more classes.
Okay. And are any of these classes that you're teaching that are filled with a lot of environmental science students, or do they have a notable lab or field component?
Yes, they do. So mineralogy, a lot of environmental science majors take that in addition to the geology majors. So currently we're constrained by the number of microscopes we have. Mm-hmm. And so a little more financial support would be nice to expand that a little bit. And to some degree, we have been a little restricted in terms of what we can do for field trips because of the numbers in the upper level courses.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a cadre of TAs that you're able to tap to help run the lab sections, or is this falling solely on the faculty?
A lot of our lab sections for upper level courses are taught by faculty. Lab sections for the introductory geology course those are typically taught by adjuncts or by environmental science graduate students. Mm-hmm. So that's working out okay. We think a goal is to start employing more undergraduate TAs, not to teach the labs, but to just help deal with the load of something like 35 students in an introductory geology lab is a little much for one person to handle.
Okay, interesting. So Alan is saying that Martin Microscope in South Carolina has some used Leicas for sale if you're so interested. So there you go. You have a pitch looking for some cheap microscope access. No, that's very, very interesting. So Leona and Peter, we haven't heard from you guys. Certainly, at Hawaii and Penn State, very unique, unique program. So, do you have anything that you want to add as far as the issues of enrollment?
Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, Penn State's history of enrollment is kind of curious that we experienced high numbers in the early to mid-'80s, as most programs did, with about 250 students. That dropped to below 100 for the late 1980s, and then in the early 90s we peaked again at about 250 students. And by 10 years later, we were down to about 70 majors. But what's really been driving enrollment heavily for us at Penn State is the Marcellus Shale play.
Mm-hmm.
And we are up to 170 majors now and growing. So we are facing some pretty severe pressures just with respect to classroom space. I think that's our most serious concern, is that our classes are, they're just too large now for the spaces that we've assigned to them. Classroom space for the whole campus is restricted right now, and so that's just a difficulty that we're trying to manage from year to year. One of the things I wondered if you had a special insight about is projecting forward, because we know that the demographics suggest that over time the total number of students going to college will be diminishing. And so I kind of wondered whether you had a sense for whether the difficulties that we're dealing with now are only going to increase, or whether we might actually start to see things even out or even decline.
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball on that. I mean, I think one could look forward and see two distinctive models that that one could use. One, I think, would be the issue that these capacity problems could be a huge challenge, because even with the demographics move forward, and we see total college attendance probably slack off a little bit, you do have the big issue that, compared to even 15 years ago, as a percentage of, undergraduate enrollments, geology is way down, even though our numbers, our actual numbers are way up. So we never experienced that parallel growth with everybody else. So if we were to return to where we were back in the even in the late 80s, as things started to decline, around the 1% of all college majors being geology majors, we got back to that level right now. We'd be seeing about triple the number of majors that we currently have. So I think that's certainly one big issue that sits out there, that if we return to our former glory as a role on campus, that could be a big challenge. I think the other side of it, though, and I would be curious on your insights to being there at Penn State, is, as we see more and more efforts moving online, I mean, how is your program's interaction with, like Penn State World Campus and things like that certainly are growing by leaps and bounds, and probably is shifting some of that demographic as well?
We are actively developing online courses, but I don't see that the online courses are a solution to this problem for the most part, because of the very nature of geosciences, that we really need to take students to the field. We need to involve them in laboratory exercises, and those kinds of things are not accomplished all that effectively through online courses. So we are exploiting online opportunities because they are really large revenue sources for us right now. But we're not really exploiting them as a way of solving this problem of increasing geoscience enrollment. I'd be curious if other people are doing that and how that's working.
Yeah, I mean, the only case I've really heard, and I think it's more parallel to what you're saying as far as a revenue standpoint, was Northwestern Missouri University, which its undergraduate geo program was really suffering, and they spun up a more of a geospatial-oriented master's, and I think it was a PSM, in fact, and that boomed with like 135 graduate students in it, but it was mostly a cash cow, and it helped them actually, improve the program to that, which led to, increases in their undergraduate enrollments as well. So I'm not sure of other cases in the geosciences, that parallel yet. I mean, you guys might be up front on that. Leona indicates that classroom space is a very large problem, especially for their MATLAB course, and that all the courses and labs have at least one section and need to probably open up more sections, but haven't actually done that, basically because of faculty limitations. And James, I've unmuted you on the phone, so you should be able to speak, hopefully.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
Hey, all right, okay. Yeah, I agree with what Peter was saying. We've seen the same thing, but probably on a smaller scale than Penn State has. Just the nature of geology requires hands-on, training. But we are taking advantage of developing online courses, mainly for courses that would meet some of the campus general education requirements. And that does provide a significant amount of support for us that we can put toward geology majors.
Do you see that ever evolving past that? I mean,
it's still a novelty, and we're still getting pressure from above to develop online courses. But, we've got mixed feelings in the department. There might be a little bit more room for evolution on some of the courses that don't have as much of a field component, but I really don't know how we can get a really effective online course that requires field work. I don't know. We've got people working on it, but the verdict's still out here.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting. So, and for your program, James, what is sort of the local driver for enrollments? Is there anything specific?
We're seeing a couple things. I think we saw a big boost. I mentioned a 25% increase in geology just since spring, and I think some of that is because of the drop in the economy and people are coming back to school. We're seeing a big increase in the applications for graduate work, and we're not able to take them all. But also in Kansas City, we have a number of employers. We have a large number of geotechnical firms. We have the District 7 EPA office here, Corps of Engineers, USGS Water Resources Division, and we have alumni that go to all those places. And we get students from those places as well that are coming back for an advanced degree. And so I think as long as we've got such a good market here, most of our students are from the area, and they're going to look for jobs in the area. And, other than going over to University of Kansas, about 25 miles west of here, we're the only game in town. And so we kind of emphasize the things that people would need to get into those positions.
And you bring up something I haven't thought about. General question for everybody. I mean, is there a role for your alumni relative to, some of these issues that you might be facing with these sudden increases in enrollments? It seems like classroom space is a big problem, but it seems like instructors or even enough adjuncts to handle things. Is there a role for the alumni in these situations?
I'll jump in again and say yes, because for one thing, they've let us know about what opportunities are in the area, but also they've let us know what the companies are looking for, and that has helped us to adjust our our curriculum, so that it remains relevant.
And you've been able to successfully convey that to the prospective majors then?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, that's really cool. So you're definitely seeing a bigger component. I mean, your majors, all these new majors are coming in. I mean, they're in there to be employable. Would that be fair?
I think most of them are.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a few that are looking to go on into academia. but I think most of them are going out with a bachelor's or master's degree and looking for a job, in a non-academic setting.
Okay, interesting. So Alan has added on that at Clemson, the admins are also pushing the online courses, but the faculty and the students are skeptical, especially in the field and lab-based majors, which I think is a pretty common refrain that we hear. A question I'd like to pose to Leona out there at the University of Hawaii: what is the local driver for your majors? You might be able to share with us. And while we wait for an answer on that, Pranoti, why don't you unmute yourself and talk about Georgia Southern and that growth that you guys saw down there?
Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I was wondering if any of you are in joint departments. Prior to coming to AGU, I was a faculty member at Georgia Southern University, where it was a joint department of geology and geography. So what happened was when GIS came on board and we had started, we put a GIS minor on the books. We got a lot of students that started to take the GIS courses, and that helped the growth in the geography program. And the geology faculty, and I was a geology faculty, we got pretty smart. We said, hey, it would be great if our geo students also took a GIS course or two. And so then, the geology growth sort of started to keep up with the geography growth, and so that sort of helped. And so that was an example of GIS helping to grow the department. So I was wondering if any of you are in joint departments. It didn't sound that way, but I was just curious if that has helped other departments that you know of.
So Alan's indicating that his program is involved geology, environmental engineering, and biosystems engineering. So certainly another one of these combined things. James, you have a...
Okay.
Yeah, we have combined geology, geography, and environmental studies with BA and BS in each of those. But we also started a GIS certificate program, and we now require the intro GIS for all three majors. It's now a requirement. So we're trying to incorporate and get as much overlap between those as we can.
Nice.
And I think that's helped a lot.
Right. Great.
So, Joel, I'd be curious, with Towson being a good regional university there in Maryland, but not necessarily quote unquote the research flagship. Where do you guys sort of stand in the mix as far as your collaboration with other departments, and particularly with like the strong geography program that's down at UMBC, for instance? Is there even some cross-campus pollination that is possible out there?
The geology program here is actually in a department of physics, astronomy, and geosciences, but there's not a ton of, crossover in terms of content between the physics, astronomy, and the geosciences. A lot of our work tends to be with other people in the environmental science program who are scattered throughout different departments like chemistry and biology.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a geography department here on campus at Towson, but it's in the College of Liberal Arts. We're in the College of Science and Mathematics. And so there's, some of our geology students take geography classes for some of their upper level electives, but there hasn't been much interaction between faculty, at least in my couple of years thus far, because they're in a different building. There are only a couple of them that are physical geographers, and so in some ways they've certainly helped us out with our upper level electives, but it's not necessarily a designed and sort of intentional thing. It just sort of works out.
Gotcha. So, since it sounds like most of the programs, Penn State, is a single geoscience program, as Peter indicates, but it sounds like most everyone else sort of involved in some level of multi-program department. what, how, are these other, we heard about the environmental sciences program being a big driver and burden in essence on there at Towson. What about these other sort of attached programs? Are they seeing similar large growths in enrollment? I mean, are we seeing this sort of a STEM-wide or in the general concept area, or is geoscience sort of booming more than others? Be curious, if this is really more of a matter of a bigger community issue. So Alan indicates that their engineering programs are growing pretty fast as well. James, how about in your situation?
We're seeing growth in our programs. Some of them started up very fast when the economy went bad a few years ago, and now it's tapering off. But geology now has picked up a bit. On the campus as a whole, enrollment has increased, but in arts and sciences it has actually decreased this year, and we're not quite sure why. That's where Geosciences is located.
Okay.
So we're blaming a lot of the increase just on people kind of running from the economy right now,
right?
Going back to get retrained and so on.
Okay. Peter, what about you up at Penn State? I mean, as far as relative to some of the other associated, programs that are floating around that certainly very large and diverse campus.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. You asked about administrative support, and Penn State has an administrative structure where we have several colleges, and our Department of Geosciences is part of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. It turns out that some of the other programs in our college have exploded at an even greater rate than we have. We have an Earth and Energy and Mineral Engineering department that has seen absolutely explosive growth, well over 1,000 majors now, partly fueled by their creation of a business finance major, energy business and finance, which I think almost they regret because it's been so popular that they don't have the manpower to handle it. And it's forced the dean to divert a lot of our college resources over to this Department of Energy and Mineral Engineering. So even though Geosciences is straining right now under this burden of high enrollments, the problem is that there are other departments within our college that are in even a worse situation.
Interesting. So I guess except for James, I mean, the STEM areas seem to be definitely booming. On average, certainly the bio we know as well. Do you? I mean, I guess for all of you, are you seeing? We heard some from James about maybe not necessarily cash support, but what I would say is some intelligence support and assistance from the local companies, not just the alumni, but sort of the industry and the end employers. Are you seeing that same kind of input or other ways of support that the broader profession is coming to the table? Are you seeing an increase in number of internship opportunities, ways to accommodate all these students?
Is anybody jumping in, Chris?
No. Oh. Feel free.
My sense is that the employment opportunities and internship opportunities are growing. And so I think Penn State, like other programs, we've been pretty successful in placing our students with industry. And this is the industry recruiting month at Penn State, as it probably is for other universities. And I've been impressed that they are feeling like they can't get enough people. They say that there are 4 offers for every one student. Well, what is that? Every one student gets about 4 offers, and so they're all competing against each other. So the demand is really there. And so obviously we're filling some kind of a need.
And the feedback from them, or I mean, has there been any direct feedback other than obviously the most obvious? They're hiring them, so they like your graduates.
Yes.
Has there been any other specific feedback that they've given as far as student preparation or other issues, or just a good old slap on the back?
I don't know if you're talking about, for instance, are they providing support, like financial support, to help us deal with the rising numbers?
That could be one
And they're
thing.
doing some of that, but not at the level that we, of course, would like to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm just wondering if they have very specific things that they would like to see some of these students maybe come out with. I mean, that's obviously.
They always do, don't they?
Yeah.
But in fact, I was at we have an alumni advisory board, and most of the members of the alumni advisory board are from industry, and I just had a retreat with them yesterday. Their sense was that students are less quote-unquote workforce ready today than they were, say, 10 or 20 years ago. And I don't quite know whether that's a perpetual complaint, but I think there is a little bit of a sense that students are just, even though they've taken some of the same courses that they always have, there's a little bit less of a sense that they're really prepared for the work sector. A lot of that we talked about this a lot, we just attributed it to social forces, that students are essentially breaking ties with parents at a much later age than they used to. We don't really think it's anything programmatic on our part, because the curriculum has remained the same. We're still encouraging students to take the courses that industry is asking us to prepare them in.
That's a very interesting insight I hadn't thought of. James, you have your hand up. Did you have something that you want to jump in on?
Yeah, you were mentioning internships, and this year what we found, usually have plenty of internships in the environmental studies area, where they can work with not-for-profit groups and as well as companies in the area. And there are some in GIS and geography, but we really haven't seen that many in geology, which is kind of surprising considering the geotechnical firms and those other opportunities that I mentioned. And I don't know if it's just that we're not going out looking for them or trying to beat the bushes for them or what. But we only have, I had one intern this summer working with the Kansas City Police Department Crime Lab, and that's the only one I've heard of for a while.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Pranoti, you had a question for Peter. Why don't you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Peter, I was wondering, how do you handle, first of all, do you have field trips in your intro courses, in your intro geology courses, say your basic Geology 1 course?
Yes, we do.
And how do you handle these? Do you have buses that take, all these students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The famous Penn State blue buses. They are painted completely blue.
And how about the upper division courses? You still have departmental vans to,
Yes.
Like say if you have 40 students in mineralogy, how do you deal with the logistics?
Well, it's funny you ask, because I teach mineralogy, and
okay.
it is really difficult, because it used to be 10 years ago that we had about 20 students in mineralogy, and now we're double that. And we've also added a section in both fall and spring, so we're more than double the numbers in mineralogy. I really worry about safety considerations, frankly. That's because we are standing on roadsides looking at outcrops, and it's hard to corral 40 students. 20 I can kind of handle with the assistance of the teaching assistant, but yeah, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I guess I would mention, too, Penn State offers its own field camp. I don't know whether any of the other participants are at schools where you run your own field camps, but we require summer field camps, a 6-week course out in Utah, Wyoming, Montana. And the numbers are, again, double what they used to be. We're up at about 48 students is what we had at our field camp this past summer. And that was really logistically difficult. Again, one faculty member with 48 students, and I think we had 2 teaching assistants, graduate teaching assistants. And whenever there were disciplinary problems, and I'm afraid to say that there were a few, it made it very, very difficult for the instructor. And we are having to face this question of whether we send 2 faculty out at a time for the field camp courses, or how we handle it. As Chris was talking about alumni, it made me wonder whether maybe that would be one way. We do have some very supportive alumni, and I'm I'm guessing we might have some people who would be interested in helping out with the field course.
Interesting. So, Peter, Alan has a question for you about the feedback that you're getting from employers. All right, maybe this was actually for James, or really both of you. Have the complaints from employers, the feedback then do the graduates have enough basic STEM training, or is this workforce readiness issue more the social factors, do you think?
James, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. Yeah, what I'm hearing is they want better communication skills. So we've a number of years ago we put in basically a technical writing class that we call senior seminar, where students have to present something in a professional way or learn how to do that. And then there's been some comments about the degree of quantitative skills, mathematics and so on. Even though we require for the BS up through calculus, and they have to have statistics, we've still got enough people coming out that are just squeaking by in that some of the employers and people out there would like them to be a little bit better prepared.
Interesting.
I've also heard from employers that there are concerns about communication skills, both oral communication skills and written skills.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're trying to improve at Penn State. But I was struck during my discussion yesterday with the Alumni Advisory Board that there has been a shift among at least some of the petroleum and natural gas companies who are hiring to focus a little bit more on behavior than on basic STEM skills. And this really surprised me, but they're actually looking, when they interview our candidates, they're looking more for evidence of maturity and the ability to work in teams because they're feeling as though they can actually train students in the content that they need to know for the job.
So I mean, have they been specific about the deficit, the deficiencies on the behavior side?
No. They were just talking about, I think communication is part of it. It's making eye contact. It's being able to articulate and work as a team.
Gotcha. So Alan thanks both of you for your input, and he says that they're facing the exact same feedback, and they're trying to approach it by incorporating technical writing, oral communications in their senior capstone classes. How do you guys handle the communications issue? James?
Oh, okay.
Somebody jumping in? Go ahead, James.
Okay, I was going to say in our senior seminar class, we talk about basically how communications are done in the field, what some of the hallmarks are of it, and why it's that way. And then the students have to prepare a report on pretty much an approved topic of their choice, where as if they're writing a manuscript for publication. So they have to pay attention to some of the things there. They could also write it as though it were a report for management. So there are some options to them. And then they have to give an oral presentation as if it were a presentation at something like GSA, where it's timed, and they're going to get questions and so on. And as an alternative, they could also do a poster session, which again would be treated as if they were presenting at GSA or something. And even though during the class a lot of the students don't like it at all, I've had students come back 2 or 3 years later after they've gone out for an interview or worked with a company, and they say, thank you for giving them that opportunity to do that in a safe environment where there was very little risk. And I'm sure I've got room for improvement on how we do that, but right now I'm getting good feedback saying it was a worthwhile effort to concentrate on really things that they probably should have picked up earlier.
And again, this is Peter Heaney at Penn State. I would just echo every single thing I heard, because we require a senior thesis of all of our geoscience BS majors. And the senior thesis requires students to work on an independent research project with a faculty member and also to write it up as a scientific paper and to offer a public presentation in the format of a national science conference. And for a lot of students, that is a transformative experience. And I think it is really excellent preparation for what they will be doing once they graduate, whether they go on in academia or industry. But that said, I do think we just need to improve some aspects of the writing experience. And so I've been talking with some members of the English department at Penn State. We require our students to take several English courses, but they're not very well tailored for the science cohort. And I'm trying to see whether we can't work with the English department to make some of these English courses a little bit more relevant to the experience of the science major.
Mm-hmm. I'd be curious, many years ago in my undergraduate experience for the senior thesis program, they actually had invited alumni back that were working in the private sector to read the written proposals and then actually sit in on the orals for the final thesis. And basically, they obviously had a very different take on what was good, what was bad than the faculty. And I'm just curious, any experience you guys involve your alumni in any ways like that, or even invite back on a research seminar day or anything like that?
At UMKC, we have
I think
not.
it's a great idea. We've never done it.
Yeah, we have not done it very much at UMKC.
Okay. So, yeah, certainly something that was interesting, and
we have not done it.
Okay.
So I was going to say we have not done it either here at Towson. We have a senior research requirement similar to the other places, and we, in addition to writing something up, we tend to have them write something shorter than a thesis, but go through multiple iterations of it to really try to work on their writing. And the same sort of thing with the oral presentations. That's where having a smaller program allows us to do that at whereas you couldn't do that at a place like Penn State with as many seniors as you would have.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, very, very interesting. Are there any other topics that folks want to try to tackle on this? I guess hearing none, I don't want to keep everybody. I think this has been a really good 50 minutes of discussion. I really appreciate everyone's input. We will be recording this. This will get posted on YouTube and through our websites, and we'll make note to all the other department chairs about this resource, and hopefully maybe we can revisit this topic, in the future, because I think there's some very interesting ideas and certainly some pressing issues out there. Oh, before we head off, Alan did.
Chris, for organizing it.
Yeah, no problem. One quick thing. Alan just posed a quick question. Are your senior research capstones a requirement for all your students, or is it optional for some of them?
This is Jim. It's optional. Well, yeah, it's optional. We do have a fairly active undergraduate research program here, and that's separate from the department. It's in all areas at UMKC. And many of our students will present some of their work there instead. And but there isn't a requirement for anything of that type.
Okay. And Joel indicates senior research is required at Towson. How about at Penn State, Peter?
It is required of all of our geoscience BS majors and geobiology BS majors. And the increasing enrollment has strained the senior thesis program as well. It used to be that people in my position, and I'm the associate head for undergraduate programs, that part of my job was to read through every single senior thesis and iterate with the students and work with them very closely. And that's really become logistically impossible when we have 35 senior theses. And so the burden has shifted back to the primary research advisor. There are good things about that, but it does kind of mean that I think the students are getting a little bit less consistent feedback with respect to just the quality of the writing. So these are just challenges that we're working on.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate your input. I thought this was very, very productive.